Thank you for tuning in. You're listening to the Beyond 50 radio program. I'm Daniel Davis. Well, we're in trying times this day and age as people are trying to figure out what we're supposed to do when it comes to money and livelihood. We got a bunch of people looking for bailouts and wondering why can't people down on the lower end who seem to be suffering from this financial crisis get some of that money as well. The question you might even ask yourself is, do you find yourself in a situation where money just seems to be elusive to you? Or maybe you have more than enough, maybe even more than your neighbors, but for some reason you find yourself at a loss for a sense of purpose. With us on the Beyond 50 radio program today is the author of a new book out that is simply titled Soul Currency. And our guest is a former investment banker and member of the New York Stock Exchange who is also an accomplished entrepreneur and spiritual teacher. And as an investment banker and business coach, he has advised some of America's best managed companies. And he's here to talk with us today about the book Soul Currency and what the relationship and emotional ties and intelligence is between us and money. And our guest today on the Beyond 50 radio program is Ernest D. Chu. And Ernest, thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Thank you.
Now, great book. That's about all I can say about it. When you see a lot of books out there, there's a lot of how-tos, what were withals and so forth, but yours really gets into the heart of the, I guess, call it the soul matter, if you will. What had you decide to go this particular direction with Soul Currency?
Well, I basically noticed that when I became a spiritual teacher, that the whole idea of the energy of love, which is a universal energy that circulates, looked very much like financial currency, something that I was very familiar with. And it was a medium of exchange. It went around the world many, many times during the day, and it also, when you invested it, it had the opportunity to create what economists call capital formation. And then I began to realize that I had it backwards, that it wasn't that the soul's currency looked like financial currency. It was really that financial currency came out of soul currency, and that financial currency is nothing more than the imagination of basically symbols and agreements. And when you add a fear to it, you get to see that it's not that real, that those symbols and agreements change very quickly, and you get what has been happening in the last 6 months or so.
I know it's really quite interesting, especially in this day and age when you see the financial bailouts that the government are proposing or actually giving to people such as AIG, that the perception from the public is that, well, how come these people who are sitting up there at the top chewing on golden parachutes are getting all this money when down here I'm struggling? What do you think from your point of view is truly going on here from a soul perspective?
Well, I think that literally there's never been a time that has been clear as to what's real and what's not. Mm-hmm. And the tendency is to really look outside of yourself, to look outside of circumstances. And most people look at it as if, well, you know, it'd be nice if somebody came to my rescue or came and wrote me a big check. But you see, most of the time, most people really, while they have a sort of a bailout consciousness, they don't have the idea of deserving. And so even if somebody were to write that check or whatever it is, I would guess that within a matter of months or less than a year, they'd be back in the same circumstances. So it's really what's inside of you that's really important. And this is the time that instead of really looking at all the things that are being lost, like your IRA or investments in the stock market or whatever, that you really should begin to look at developing the investments that are within you, because those investments, as invisible as they might seem, are actually worth a great deal of money or a great deal of value to you, such as, for instance, imagination. And, what would the Walt Disney Company, as an example, pay J.K. Rowling for 1 week of her imagination?
Mm-hmm. That's actually a really interesting point. Now, I know that in your book, you might, for the audience out there, might have what they would have just heard you say as well. So what you're saying is if I do what I love or what's inside of me, the money will follow. But actually, in your book, it's a lot more than that.
Well, what I've done is I've really begun to develop a way by which you can tie together using the language of finance and value, so that you can tie together a lot of the things that you've taken for granted or haven't valued. So as an example, we all have basically things that allow us to be creative, our imagination, our ability to envision things. We all have high-quality character traits such as integrity and determination, things of that type. And we all have cultivated skills, and that counts too, as well as experience. So what we tend to do is we tend to really kind of downplay it. I mean, when we do, that's the problem with self-assessments, is that we always underestimate what we're really worth and what our real skills are. We tend to be our harshest critics, or we tend also not to really count some of these things, because these things are, for instance, divine gifts. Well, divine gifts are great because, and all gifts are great because they feel like a very loving experience that somebody's given us something for free. But when push comes to shove, we really don't think of those things as being worth a lot of how it translates into value. But when we call them assets, all of a sudden now this is the language of banking, this is the language of really wealth accumulation, etc. And so when we begin to understand that the greatest wealth is within us, and that most of us really don't even begin to utilize the great potential of our spiritual assets, we can actually create capital out of these things in the same way that venture capital firms create capital too. And by the way, venture capital firms, as much as it sounds like they're investing money, they don't invest money into business plans. They invest, if you ask a good venture capitalist, what are you investing in? They're investing in the people. So they're investing in that person's soul currency, even though they may not use that exact language. Mm-hmm. So that's really, the inner wealth is really important, and that's what actually creates the outer wealth, and that's what creates opportunity, and that also allows us to pursue what it is that we bring to our life that we really enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know it's really interesting, too, when you consider what we're talking about here for the listening audience, is that we look inside for what our assets are. And then, as you just described, which is so true with many of us, is that we tend to downplay, or we think that humility is the order of the day. We want to be humble. Oh, I'm not as good as you say I am. And you realize, just as you're saying, now, wait a minute, if we translated that into dollars, are you saying that you're going to allow me to pay you 50 cents versus maybe $100,000? And it kind of changes somebody's attitude there to how well that should be expressed. Now, you talk about these as what you would call counterfeit beliefs, and I actually like that term, counterfeit, because it gives you a sense of betrayal to where you feel like you're even betraying yourself, so you'll look into those better. Now, how did you come up with that particular term, and how does it apply to helping someone cultivate those inner gifts that they have?
Well, I obviously we all know what counterfeit currency is, and if you were to pass counterfeit currency around, you would be violating some federal laws and probably get a visit from one of the Treasury Department. But basically, there is no federal law or anything about passing these phony beliefs and just passing them on about beliefs about yourself and in general about your view of life. And I will tell you that does as much damage economically and to you as a person than as much as it does for having to pass counterfeit currency around. So that's one of the reasons I came up with it, because I really saw that if you had someone else who would go around telling your friends, family, neighbors, your business associates, and sometimes even a few people that you don't even know, all about you, or the same kinds of stuff you tell everybody else, you would be so incensed. You couldn't believe that there would be somebody who hated you that much that was going around spreading all these lies about you.
Right.
And there isn't that somebody. That somebody is you.
Mm-hmm. I know it's quite interesting in a day and age where we're understanding physics at such a greater level that you're seeing more and more now people out there expressing this ideal of the law of attraction, this universal law that's out there, that if you simply just wish and intend, that you should be able to receive. And I think the beauty about soul currency is that as a person reads this book, you can't help by being transformed by the wisdom that simply says, but what are you truly doing to move toward that desire? What is it that you are giving to move toward that desire? So it really speaks very loudly about what are you doing in service? What is it of you that you are giving so that others actually, I guess, prosper in this world? What are you giving there? And I think that that's a very important theme about what your book talks about.
Yes, absolutely. I think that that's the difference between just wishing or intending that you'll be getting things, because as you get a higher idea of what you really are about, and you allow yourself to invest without investing in really the form of things, as opposed to, the substance of things, as opposed to the form, you will actually find that there will be things coming back to you and things happening in your life that are much richer, much more fulfilling and satisfying than you could have ever imagined.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing that's really unique about a journey such as this of self-discovery, is to realize what you are and who you are and what your special reason for being here is. And the more that is expressed, the more abundance that you can find yourself experiencing. Now, you mentioned the author Rowling earlier in the program. Tell people about her story. I know most people know her as the Harry Potter, but it's really interesting what day and what age that she actually embarked on this Harry Potter series. It's quite an interesting story.
Well, actually, she obviously, when she was a little girl, used to write in her journal about pink rabbits and things of that type. But one day, she was a single mother, and she had a job where she was doing some translation, and she was teaching. She was a teacher as well. And one day, she just really got the idea, particularly commuting from the train back and forth to work, that she needed to really write this book. And it was so strong that she decided to take a break from her job. And obviously she didn't have the money to even invest in this venture, so she went on public assistance to supplement what she was doing. And you can imagine what the neighbors were saying. The neighbors were saying, hey, you're writing a book on fantasy. Who's going to be reading that? You've got children that you got to take care of. You need to really get a job and really be responsible. And essentially, this was
be miserable like us.
Of course.
What's the matter with you?
and when she first got started, of course, she didn't know anything about it. She wrote this thing, and she probably sent it to all the wrong agents, the people that didn't really. They were selling other types of books, so it wasn't the right one. And finally, when it got to the right person, which through a whole combination of guided circumstances, this is what the Harry Potter series came to life. And within about 12 years, 10 to 12 years, the Harry Potter brand and the amount of money that J.K. Rowling made out of it exceeded that of the Queen of England. So you can just see that there is an enormous, what we call spiritual capital formation that happens. Now, this is, J.K. Rowling I'm using that as an example because she's the best known of many of the people that I talk about, but everybody can do that to some degree. You don't necessarily have to do it, and most people actually wouldn't even accept that type of fame or success because they still have a lot of those counterfeit ideas about being able to accept their good on the installment plan.
Now, tell us in your book, and again, it's interesting because I think I finished reading the book, it was about 2 weeks ago, and then you I remember what the basis of it was and so forth, but let's talk about those counterfeit beliefs. What some of the more obvious ones are that people might be listening thinking, maybe I am kind of carrying around some of those things, and how you would examine and work through those so you can basically clear the way toward getting to where you want to be.
Well, the biggest one is really I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve, or I have to earn my deserving, or I'm not loved. I love everybody else, but the world doesn't really love me back, or that when I'm with a group of people, I don't say anything because I don't have anything worthwhile to say, or I'm succeeding, but every time I get to a point where I'm going to be successful, something happens. Or another thing is that I have to struggle for everything, and only after I have tremendous struggle do I finally succeed.
Mm-hmm. Or you get to a point where you're building abundance, but then something comes along and takes it away, and you realize that's something that always happens. How come something always happens when I'm on my way, kind of a thing as well. Now, as you discover these counterfeit beliefs, what are the suggestions you have for people to work through those?
Well, the first thing is really think of them as counterfeit beliefs.
Okay.
I mean, if you had a counterfeit $1,000 bill in your wallet, and I actually make some of my students carry these counterfeit play money in their wallets during the 10 weeks that we have class, and they get to really see how comfortable that they are, how it kind of they become very used to it. And so the important thing is to really, at the end of 10 weeks, we have a burning bowl ceremony where we just simply burn it and release it into the universe and basically transmute that.
Mm-hmm. Well, very good. Now, it's really interesting, too, in this day and age that people take a look, and it's really challenging, say, on a spiritual level, that you have people who are very spiritual, but then they struggle. But then you have some people that aren't spiritually evolved at all, and they seem to be rich. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think the whole idea of what is spiritually and spiritually evolved, that's something that people who tend to be on that spiritual path kind of set up that measurement and that opinion of that judgment of others. It's just very similar to people who are leading a healthy lifestyle versus people that kind of just eat things like hamburgers and French fries and things of that type and don't exercise. You can imagine that the people that are exercising all the time and eating organic food might have something to say about the people that don't eat right, and then they kind of look at somebody that is 100 years old and they smoke and they drink and so forth and say I guess it's in the genes. But you have the same thing happening in the area of spirituality, that everything is spiritual. You don't have to necessarily even go to church. You don't necessarily have to be overtly loving, but you will find that many of the top people who tend to have a very high profile, Donald Trump is one of them as an example, and I know that he has a very unique public view that he's very ruthless and hard, and he fires people and whatever it is, and that's an image that he kind of likes to foster. But on the other hand, Donald is a very loving person. He's given a lot to causes. He's his Mar-a-Lago place in Florida was the site for many fundraisers and things of that type, and you don't really hear a lot of that about what he does. And so people might say, well, gee, I don't understand why he's been so successful, and here I am, I basically meditate and I eat organic food and I look at the sunrise. The one thing that I will tell you is that Donald has a really good idea of being able to receive, and that's not really that is a spiritual thing, because when you receive, it's not about being selfish. It's about allowing the flow to come through you. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what a lot of spiritual people are working on, issues of receiving. And so they mask that by basically concentrating on giving. And then eventually, because they're not receiving, or they're only receiving on a sporadic basis, they run out of things to give. And so eventually they are in that struggle of saying, well, I don't understand it. I'm so giving. I don't understand why I'm being punished and having to struggle for money. Well, a lot of that's really understanding that there is also the receiving issues. And we're not talking about being selfish, but we're really talking about understanding that as a a divine being, a spiritual being that you really are entitled to receive, and in fact you have to receive, because receiving is part of the great flow.
I've got to really hit on that point, because you were so right, and it's amazing how often you see people who sort of have, I guess, trouble receiving. When I used to work in the restaurant industry serving people, it was amazing what would happen when the bill would come, and you'd have 4 people sitting there and 2 of them fighting over who's going to pay for the bill. And I thought to myself, this is quite interesting, because the first person that would grab the bill, if that's the way you wanted to play the game, should be the one who really desires to pay. And I'd get people sometimes that would just look at me and be angry with me. And I would be like, well, this is a decision you guys made. I'm just here to take care of business. That's about it. But eventually it got to a point where when that would happen, when somebody would generously say, I'd like to pay, and the other person would argue, I just looked right at the other person and I would say, why don't you just say thank you? And that would just leave them cold. And it's amazing just how difficult people, the time they have with receiving, as you're talking about.
Well, you don't even have to go to a restaurant. You just, as an example, if somebody gives you a compliment, how do you receive a compliment? And you'll say, gosh, you look great, or that color looks good on you. Well, there'll be some people that will say thank you. But there'll be other people that will say, well, not really, or I don't know, and they'll just push that compliment away.
Mm-hmm. And it's amazing, too, because when you find that you receive, as you're talking about, receive graciously, receive with an open heart, is the fact that you begin to see that you're getting more and more of it. It starts coming to you. So would you say that's a law of attraction to pay attention to, that if you repel receiving, then you're repelling the things that you desire, because that's the reason for receiving in the first place?
Well, I would say that if you've got a lot of these counterfeit beliefs, you're going to be attracting situations that are certainly going to be challenging those beliefs or feeding into them.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to get both opportunities to break through, and you'll get opportunities to mirror a lot of that. So you'll have friends of yours that may have trouble receiving too, and you either have the opportunity to see that there's something in them that is something for you to learn, or you just simply sit there and sort of have a commiseration party.
Sounds good. Now, I know that in the book Soul Currency, for those of you just joining us, we're talking with Ernest Chu and his book Soul Currency, Investing Your Inner Wealth for Fulfillment and Abundance. Now, what I liked is, and again, you had the counterfeit beliefs, which I really get a kick out of that phrase, I think, because it's so poignant that people go, yeah, how come I'm cheating myself, so to speak? And then the other thing you talk about, too, that I really enjoy, and why this is, to me, an important word, is the journey itself, because that's really what it's all about. The fulfillment becomes a result of the journey that you take. Now, you call it adventure prize. How did you come up with a term like that?
Well, I really began to see that when you invested your spiritual capital, which means that you define how you're going to, what your intentions are, what your focus is, and you just invest it toward a project or your children or a garden or any type of thing, or a more fulfilled life. That may be a general kind of thing that where you can see things in a general way of being fulfilled and supported. So when that starts to happen, all of a sudden, when you let go of any counterfeit beliefs that are limiting that, all of a sudden that journey sort of becomes, instead of you dreaming the dream starts to dream you. And a perfect example is Jim Henson, who was a puppeteer. And Jim basically started out as somebody that entertained people, and obviously did shows for organizations so that he could support his family. And then eventually that dream sort of dreamed him, and the Muppets became him, and he never obviously dreamed in his wildest imagination that he would influence 5 or 6 generations of children. He would meet heads of state. Kermit the Frog would be a movie star. I mean, it was just wonderful.
Well, the thing is, too, is I believe Kermit the Frog actually tried running for president against Nixon. He could have never imagined a Muppet would become president. Imagine how the country would be ran there. But, you know, it's so exciting when you pick up a book like this, and it isn't one of those how to, you know, take these, but you do have certain steps, but they all have a deep philosophy that really makes sense versus, I remember back in the 80s when you'd pick up self-help, it was ways for beating the system, you know, or how to manipulate it or get around it, but this is actually getting right to the heart of the matter.
Oh, I agree. I agree that's you know, it's just really evolved over the many years that I saw my own journey evolving, and I was most fortunate. The best thing that ever happened to me is even though I started 9 companies, took 3 of them public, and there were many, many others that were successful, I had one company that literally I woke up one day and found that the CEO of the company had misrepresented their background, and so all of a sudden the financing that was going to take us to the next level disappeared. And here I was really betting on it because I really thought this was going to be a super home run. And basically I ended up personally $1 million in debt and having to make the decision that I really can't declare bankruptcy because if I ever wanted to be in the financial arena again, I needed to find another way to work it out. And I also felt really ashamed of what had happened and not being able to pay my bills. I couldn't pay my mortgage just like a lot of people today. And I was looking for something. Obviously, I wasn't looking for a total bailout. I was looking to find a solution. And I went through about 9 months of really very dark times, and ultimately what turned it around was, one, finding my spiritual center by really understanding the power of prayer and really the power of understanding that I had a gigantic spiritual partner that wanted more for me than I wanted for myself. And secondly, understanding that I didn't have to start all over again. All I had to do was to begin to become aware of my assets, with the things that were within me, including my experience and my contacts, and to be able to use those in a way that I could then generate some capital and some income coming in from that.
You know, there's so much to cover in the book, and you were just talking just briefly right there about networking, and it's about if you have a dream within inside of yourself, is to let it out, let people know about it. It's amazing, especially in America, how many people are willing to really help you along your way. You know, just give them some time, you know, and it's just amazing what you have out there at your fingertips if you would just believe and try. And it's so easy for a lot of us to sit back and watch our dreams pass us by and never put them into motion and nurture them, and then applaud others for doing that and say, well, that's great for them, but that's not good for me. But then you say to yourself, what are you holding back truly from the world that the world deserves? And as you begin to do the processes that you talk about in soul currency, you'll get excited about your days, it seems.
Yes. Well, your success is also the world's success. Mm-hmm. And the world, the success of other people is also your shared success. And when you can really see it that way, you've also arrived at the point of understanding that the collective power of creation and the collective connection to all of life is really the thing that really enables you to be able to fully create, not only from a sense of purpose and fulfillment, but also to be rewarded and to be supported abundantly.
Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, it's a great book. Soul Currency is its title, Investing Your Inner Wealth for Fulfillment and Abundance, and our guest with us today, Ernest D. Chu. Now, Ernest, do you have a website people can find out more about either how to go about getting the book, or it sounds to me like you're also doing workshops for people and helping them kind of clean up that and move toward what it is they want? Yeah.
My website is www.soulcurrency.org. And there are many free resources. First of all, you can get the book at almost any major bookstore, Borders, Barnes & Noble, any of the independent bookstores. You can get it online at Amazon or BarnesandNoble.com. Or you can go to my website, and there are links to online booksellers as well. And there are also some free resources which people who read the book, have read the book, can go to a reader's resource area where there's about 75 pages of guides and notes and things like that I've used and taught in my classes. So you'll have access to all of that, as well as some of the affirmative prayers that I've used during my dark days.
Mm-hmm. Because sometimes we have them, but it's about moving through those because, as you say in your book, Soul Currency, that helps build your spiritual strength.
Exactly, yes.
Well, Ernest D. Chu, it's been a pleasure to have you here on the program today to talk with us about your book, Soul Currency. Anything coming up here in the future for you?
Well, I'm going to be spending the better part of 2009 doing workshops and bringing the message across to across America to people who've lost their jobs, to people that are looking to develop their careers spiritually and as well as abundantly. And it's a message that I think is very important, and I've decided to take time off to really make this my contribution.
Well, very good. It's great to have people like you out there to show people that not only is there hope, but there's also something that you can do about it. Thank you for joining us here on the program today.
Well, thank you.
You bet. Again, the book is Soul Currency, and our guest today, Ernest D. Chu. You can also visit us at our website where we'll have more information about this book and how you can find out more about it. Just simply visit www.beyond50radio.com. That is the number 50 with a 50, and you can also sign up there on our free weekly e-newsletter, which goes out to you every week. I'm Daniel Davis. You've been listening to the Beyond 50 Radio Show, and thank you for tuning in. Remember, live your day past halfway.